Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, all the assembled friends and well-wishers of the Bharatiya Yuva Shakti Trust. It's genuinely my privilege to be here today at this International Mentoring Summit on the occasion of the Silver Jubilee of the Trust. The audience here doesn't need an introduction to the Trust. We are all very familiar with the activities of the Trust, and it is in our own sort of humble way a recognition of what we can do as government, the Ministry of Skill Development, in leveraging the experience and the talent of BYST that we signed that MOU. We hope to sort of go back to the details of the MOU, flesh it out, and make sure, with the encouragement of our Minister and the Honorable Prime Minister, to take this forward. I'd like to first thank Madam Venkateshan for this opportunity. What I want to do in the 5 or 6 minutes that I have is to pick up on a theme that I was talking to her when she met with me 2 or 3 days ago. To an audience like this, again, it's not necessary to be talking about the importance of entrepreneurship, and in the current context of India, the even sort of heightened importance of entrepreneurship. I think what strikes me as being important is to recognize an elephant that we seldom recognize in these public meetings, namely the fact that often the biggest barrier to entrepreneurship is likely to be the state. It is very often the government, and it's not peculiar to India, it's not peculiar to India of today. Very often the biggest barrier to the unleashing of creative energies of entrepreneurship would typically be in the state not necessarily playing the role it should be playing, or the implementational arm of the state not doing what is enshrined as the policy of the state. And paradoxically, often the question that I am asked in my current job is the role of the state in entrepreneurship. And my first answer is they are probably antithetical. We should be keeping entrepreneurs away from the state because that's probably the best way to ensure that entrepreneurs flower. And in the context of rural India, I want to spend a few minutes giving an example that people like Mr. Bajaj here are very familiar with. I had occasion 3-4 years ago in one of my previous jobs to write a report on the sugar industry. This was when I was working with Dr. Rangarajan. He was the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council, and I had the privilege of working with him. And I discovered something which I knew sort of peripherally, and which I'm sure a lot of you knew or know. Some of those things have changed, but a lot of those things still remain. When we were writing this report, to take an example of this particular industry, sugar and sugarcane, very, very important for rural India, the short sort of summary of what I discovered is who grows sugarcane, at what time, and on what extent of land. To whom does this farmer have the ability to sell the sugarcane, at what price, and at what time, and the factory that purchases this sugarcane, when does it crush the sugarcane, who does it sell the sugar to, and at what price and what time, is decided by the mighty Indian state. At every level of this chain, the role of the state, and these are different parts of the state, often working at cross purposes, but the original purpose of this whole thing was to declare, the origin of this was the declaration of sugar as an essential commodity. But if you looked at the statistics in 2012, and I did that, found to my horror that close to 85% of the sugar that is produced in the organized Indian industry is actually sold to multinational users like Coca-Cola, biscuit factories, bakeries, and a whole host of institutional purchasers. Less than 5.5% of this sugar is actually sold to consumers in whose name this entire machinery had been built up. So if anyone has any illusions of serious entrepreneurship in this sector, I would suggest that we seriously go back and relook at answering this basic question on what is the role of the state. I'm glad a lot of the machinery that I spoke about has now been dismantled, not all of it, but a lot of it. I think the worrisome part is in rural India and in particular in agriculture, the overwhelming presence of the state even today is enormous. And I think in addition to a lot of the kind of activities that we are discussing, perhaps a distinguished audience like this, with the help of government, should also focus on this basic question on what is the precise interface between various arms of the state and individuals and enterprises. And I think we'll learn a lot in terms of where we move forward. Now, is this something which is endemic to India? I don't believe so. If you read history of Indian entrepreneurship, and not by individuals who don't know this business, but distinguished economic historians like Scott Levy or Tom Tinberg, for instance, the famous history of Marwadis that Thomas Tinberg has written, Scott Levy's book on the caravan trade in India, as far back as 600 years ago, some of the finest financial derivatives created in India were being operated by merchants as far away as the end of the river Volga. And I'm talking about 500 years ago. So entrepreneurship is not new to India. I think all we need to do is to get back this spirit of entrepreneurship with the help of people like all of you. And in this endeavor, whatever we can do as part of this government, we will not be found wanting. I wish the trust success in all its endeavors and look forward to much greater cooperation in the future. Thank you.